months ago, I quoted Shakespeare, Hamlet, in Cambridge University, and I've said that the corruption is seen as an ulcer hidden beneath the skin, which secretly poisons the body, and it has actually poisoned many governments. And corruption is seen as one of the highest issues that we are gripping in Sri Lanka. The previous regime was reset because of corruption. Right now, there are talks also on this economic climate in the society. My paper will highlight 3 areas on economic and political security and internal conflicts, and finally explore possibilities of the NTS architecture before this region. Sri Lanka is going through much of political instability, and I did identify like 6 months before, and when I sort of worked on a book called Sri Lanka at Crossroads, which will be launched in a few days' time. And the instability is clear because of the internal political dynamics of the coalition. Now, NTS in South Asia, I don't want to repeat what the other speakers have clearly mentioned, that 23% of the world's population lives in South Asia. 1.4 billion people in South Asia, out of that 42%, or 488 million, live on less than $1 a day. Now, excessive spending on defense continues to have an adverse impact on the capacity of the countries in the region to provide adequate resources to spend on human security programs. South Asia's ratio of military expenditure as a percentage of GDP is one of the highest in the world. Environment degradation, infectious disease, poverty, and extremism cannot be addressed only by military means and require a multi-stakeholder approach. Capacity of states to address these issues alone and independently is nearly impossible, and states are inadequate to bring solutions by themselves. Approaches to NTS challenges require us to go beyond traditional security frameworks. A transformation from state-centric to security of individual is necessary when grappling with the NTS challenges. Sri Lanka also faces natural disasters, about 300 lives being lost each year, and from floods, landslides, and we have this disaster, human-made disaster actually, in Mithuramulla, which is a garbage dump, which collapsed to the surrounding houses, which killed so many. And government failing to provide security to living standards of the citizens. It's clearly been spoken in the Sri Lankan media as well as by the people. One of the most important aspects of non-traditional security is that people should be able to live in the society that honors their political security, including their basic human rights. Political security is those rights that by which citizens are given a share in the political life of the community, including that of the management of government. Further political security is the rights to political participation, and political participation can take many forms. Sri Lankan elections, we have seen even in the last election, about 70% of the population do participate in the elections. Sri Lanka, one of the oldest democracies in South Asia, and it's rich in the democratic institutions. The nation has gone through many challenges, and in the recent constitutional crisis, there has been amendments to strengthen the executive branch of the government, and also move away powers from the executive branch towards the legislature. Now, with all these attempts, democracy has survived due to the strength of independent judiciary. A few months ago, it was economic security at the helm of political discussion which made Rajapaksa, the former president, popular and Wickramasinghe unpopular. Today, its political security at the top of its agenda made Wickramasinghe popular for preserving democracy and gaining his premiership, and Rajapaksa unpopular, losing his position. Now, as of this day, today, the cabinet will be appointed today in Sri Lanka. So this change is happening while I'm speaking to you. Although there are several cases of interference from political branches towards the judiciary, you can see in the history, Sri Lankan judiciary has played a pivotal role to restore democracy and save government institutions to bring back stability to the nation. The recent Supreme Court decision, which brought back the former Prime Minister, was one such incident. Independence of judiciary and respect towards judicial decisions is an essential to democracy. Sri Lankan government was reset by His Excellency the President Sirisena, and many view this situation in different perceptions and interpretations. One perception was due to the breach of national security by the former Prime Minister, actually now he's the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Now let me highlight few NTS factors to give legitimacy, and for example to give legitimacy and delist the branches of the terrorist outfit, the LTTE, the Tamil Tigers, by then Foreign Minister Mangala Samaravira, basically to mass scale. No, that was a huge decision which was the former Foreign Minister took, which was to delist the LTT organizations outside, and which had a lot of effect towards the society, and because we are in post-war and are we sort of ready to delist and go forward with this, and so it's seen as a national security threat. And another issue, a huge issue, was the central bank bond scam, which was in billions. Corruption record was caught and now is under investigations. So nations like Sri Lanka and many other South Asian nations become poor due to high level of economic crime and corruption scandals, and it directly affects the economy of the nation. While the rubric of NTS has evolved, firstly with the 1994 UNDP report, and going on to basically the safety nets, which was championed by Japan in 1997, soon after the Asia financial crisis, and concepts of human security focusing on reducing the human consequence of violent conflict, championed by Canada and Norway. To conceptualize all this today, we have a much broader understanding of this subject. Now, there are 8 characteristics identified by United Nations, and you can see economic and political security also in this NTS concept. So Sri Lanka and many South Asian nations are limited in capacity in these areas. Take health sector and also the dengue epidemic, which is in Sri Lanka, which was out of control, infecting many. The kidney diseases, chronic CKDU, is another huge issue in the island. The natural disasters, floods, as well as the landslides and many others, also affects the country. Now, if you look at the dimension of the LTT or the Tamil Tigers, how it affects the Sri Lankan situation, and if you closely analyze it, after there was a killing of 2 police officers recently, and this was suspected to be done by a rehabilitated LTTE fighter who has done this brutal killing due to an attempt to stop the Mahaveru Day, the celebration of the LTTE celebration. According to the terrorist expert Professor Rohan Gunaratne, in a recent interview, he is assessing this latest development, caution India and Sri Lanka that the LTTE is still a threat to their national security. Now, at the INSSL, the basically Institute of National Security Studies, which is mandate to assess the threat environment of Sri Lanka, will only determine through a process if such threat could emerge in the future. When applying the risk assessment model or the ethnic rebellion model, in Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan case, it does not capture enough data. The conflict is likely to return, and the recent incidents will trigger basically another conflict. Since LTT is completely dismantled in the island, we found no accelerating factors that LTT could regroup to fight against the military in the present environment. but there exist threats of individual incidents. So I cannot agree with Professor Rohan Gunaratne's assessment. Now, according to him, basically, there are many political assassinations that has, even in India and also in Sri Lanka, that took place, has created a political vacuum. That I could agree, there is a political vacuum created by many assassinations. Although NTT outfit has been defeated by our Valiant military, still shadow operators of the organizations and his ideology is active outside the Sri Lankan jurisdiction. NTT was designated under the UN Security Council resolutions in 1373. Somehow tactfully, by engaging with the Tamil National Alliance, the former coalition government delisted the LTTE entities on November 20th, 2015. Now, Professor Gunaratne, again Rohan Gunaratne, clearly points out it was then former foreign minister who declared, delisted the 16 organizations and 424 individuals listed by the Rajapaksa, the former regime, on 21st, 2014. The terrorist entities delisted includes the GTF, the BTF, NCCT, TYO, so many of them operating from different places, from Canada to UK and other places. He sees it as a serious threat, and the ideology is clearly visible still, and these groups are clearly sort of trying to bring back the LTTE. The basically destabilizing the government from outside using political allies in their respective nations is clearly seen. Now, this I agree with Professor Rohan Gunaratne, but this does not imply that LTT will re-emerge in Sri Lanka. Some of these groups will openly celebrate these events, the Mahavir Days and all that, but there is no sort of relevance towards re-emergence of it. Security architecture in South Asia is important at a stage like this, because since military or traditional aspects of security is a difficult part to begin to even talk about NTS architecture. So NTS, non-traditional security measures, basically would be the best way to go forward. And NTS challenges are common to all South Asian nations, and a nation like Sri Lanka, in a post-conflict nation, could begin this process. What is required in South Asia is a security architecture to curb NTS threats. Now, if you look at the WMDs, which is weapons of mass destructions, we'll see as a grave danger, but small arms, like Ashok mentioned earlier, small arms and light weapons have caused much more damage to our societies. This should be taken in to this framework, I think. While accounting for the severe constraints and impediments in overcoming deeply entrenched regional acrimonies, it is widely believed that regional security architecture is an important step towards confidence building, preventive diplomacy and conflict prevention, which could be the precedent for regional cooperation on traditional and non-traditional security issues. One of the fundamental steps in achieving cooperative security is the formulation of a holistic security architecture which would espouse security cooperation between politically diverse nations through a wide network of institutions. A viable security architecture in South Asia be envisioned as independent of SAARC, as incorporating it within SAARC would require modifications to its charter. Now, the administration and implementation of the framework would be undertaken through probably three major constituents: the intergovernment. This would include foreign ministries, home ministries, and South Asian countries. Second is the government and the non-government side. This would include key government officials as well as think tanks, academics and civil society, and the non-governmental side. This would include also the think tanks and the non-state actors. The main activities mentioned for the constituents will be for this architecture, which will be dialogue on the critical NTS issues will be undertaken through seminars, workshops. Participation would include senior government officials and think tank and non-state actors. And the second is research, is a very important area. An extensive collaborative research would be undertaken on important NTS concerns and particularly climate change, health security and disaster management. Research would be undertaken by the non-government constituents of the framework, and the findings would be disseminated along the government and non-government constituents. And finally, training of law enforcement would be undertaken at the intergovernmental level. Now, this could happen in several ways, which is like joint peacekeeping operation, joint disaster management, joint institutional arrangements for dealing with NTS threats, and annual meetings of heads of intelligence also. This sort of architecture is, as the region is having so much of the traditional issues, probably an NTS framework of to begin with, and would be a way to go forward. And Sri Lanka is, as you know, is having the chair of the BIMSTEC now, and it will be a wonderful opportunity for Sri Lanka also to begin this process, perhaps with institutions like IDSA and maybe INSS could get together on a track 2 level, but then try to work on it, because the chairmanship is for 2 years, and it will be one of the first events we could also perhaps talk and work on maybe next year. A genuine regional interest in deepening multilateral and bilateral security cooperation, resulting in the strengthening of security cooperation of NTS issues could be achieved from such architecture. Thank you.